Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Artistry Skin Science Symposium. What a great opportunity we have today to welcome our scientific advisory group to the stage today to talk about skin science. Also today we have the Innovation and Sciences team from the global Amway team, as well as the marketing team as well. They're going to highlight their latest work. And we are so lucky to have the Japan ABOs and the Malaysia ABOs here that we can all be together. So we're all really excited to kick off this event. My name is Mary Josh, and I'm the marketer on the Artistry Global Skincare team. And I will be the host for this event. So welcome, and let's get started. Scientific Advisor Group, please come to the stage.
Konnichiwa. Selamat datang. Hello. Thank you, everyone, for coming to join us today. This is the first time that we've ever had our scientific advisors on the stage in front of our ABOs. Thank you. We're in market today for a huge international science conference. And so we wanted to bring a little bit of that to you today so you can understand the great research that Artistry is doing. And also the great research that our external partners are doing at their universities and institutions. Now, to get things started, I want to talk about who they are. Okay. First of all, I have Dr. Des Tobin here from the Charles Institute in Dublin. Next, Gary Fisher from the University of Michigan. And Dr. So-Yoon Cho from Seoul National. Today we're going to talk a little bit about, health, skin health, okay? And the first thing I want to discuss is that the time that we have good health is different than the overall time that we have. Okay, there's a difference between the time that we live and the time that we live very well. And so today we're going to be talking about how do we keep great health for longer over the time span that we have here in our lives. A simple concept here comes from the Linus Pauling Institute, Dr. Tori Hagen. He says that the decline of this health that we have, especially, in our bodies and our skin, is essentially that's the increasing inability. So we, each day we have the sun and things that kind of affect us, and we aren't able to respond to that as much as we used to the older that we get. And so here's some data actually from Gary that shows what happens in the skin from actual biopsies. He took these biopsies from people very young to very old, and we see that the older you get, you have more and more damage. But does it have to be that way? I don't think so. I think there are more things that we can do to keep us healthy over that time and increase the health span that we do have. And the first thing I want to do is turn it over to Dr. Des Tobin. He's going to introduce himself briefly to talk about what causes this decrease? Because we got to understand first what causes that decline in health before we can fix it. So Des, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can help us figure out, what's causing all this mess.
Thank you very much, Jesse. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Des Tobin, and I'm a laboratory researcher at the University College Dublin in Ireland. So it's a long way from here. I'm here also for the ISID conference in Tokyo. As a species, humans have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, and the skin in particular has been a very important organ at the interface between our inside body and the world outside. So how we protect our skin organ from the environment is very, very important, and particularly from ultraviolet light. Now that we're living into longer and longer years than we did for most of our time before. So protection of our skin against the environment, particularly the environment related to pollution, in busy cities with lots and lots of cars, etc. We have to be very careful there. But also the way we expose our skin to the climate. And then we have to also ensure that we eat well from inside, so we can keep our bodies functioning from inside out as well as outside in.
Awesome. Thank you, Des. I appreciate that. So I see here on the slide this concept of exposome. So that's what you're talking about as being the environment. So all these things like light, things that we eat, that we breathe, that all these things contribute to declining health?
Yes, so the word exposome was used to describe the total exposure that our bodies have over our lifetimes with all the different sources of exposure. So some people talk particularly about ultraviolet light, but the exposome talks about everything that can impact on our bodies throughout our life. Of course, it will vary a little bit how our individual bodies respond to this, because each of us is a unique genetic being, and we will also have variation by virtue of our geographic ancestry as to how we will respond to some of the same exposures.
Interesting. Okay, that's great. Now, is there really any proof that these things outside, like pollution, because you mentioned pollution, does that affect the health of the skin?
Yes, increasingly over the last few years, work particularly from Jean Krootman's laboratory has shown that some of the particles coming from diesel fuel in cars can lead to some changes in the skin, to damage the skin. And this particular slide here shows changes in pigmentation that are caused by diesel particles. And individuals living in the East, like for you guys, you may find that skin aging first appears as irregularity of pigmentation. And this study here shows direct correlation between the irregular pigmentation and pollution, particularly pollution from vehicle fuel.
It's fascinating, Des, because typically we only think about the sun as causing some of these issues, but you're saying that, we know that we shouldn't breathe pollution, but you're saying that even getting pollution on our skin may not be the best. So that's fascinating.
And
now,
it's just very briefly there, pollution with sunlight or with UV can be a double problem. So it's not that each one works on its own, but when the sun interacts with UV interacts with pollution, it can make pollution even more damaging.
Okay, double whammy. Now, I think that possibly, though, people may hear these things and be afraid to go outside. But I guess there's probably something good from the sun as well. So there's probably a good and a bad. Do you want to mention some of that?
So yes, briefly, the World Health Organization has identified UV light as both a carcinogen, but also we know UV light is very life-affirming in that it helps us develop a very important vitamin in the skin, vitamin D. And of course, sunlight is much more than just ultraviolet radiation. There are lots of other types of light, green light, red light, yellow light, which can have life-affirming qualities. So we need not to live under a rock, but just to take care of our skin, particularly against ultraviolet radiation.
Awesome. Thank you, Des. I kind of, one question that I have for you is, thinking about these things, is there something, in your research that you're really passionate about? If you had one thing, I know we're at this huge international conference on science, what would you tell your colleagues? What is the thing that you're kind of the most passionate about as far as, this skin health goes? What would you say?
Well, thank you, Jesse, for that question. It has changed a lot in the last, say, 10 years. You probably heard of the skin microbiome, and while a lot has been talked about, and some of it may not be all that accurate, there is an increasing realization that on the surface of our skin, just like we have in our gut, an important community of little beings called microbes that have developed this relationship with our skin over hundreds of thousands of years, and how we treat that relationship between our human cells and these microbiome species is very, very important. And we're only really at the beginning of learning that relationship and how to maintain the quality of that relationship.
Awesome, Des. Thank you so much for coming here to talk to us today. This is a big treat. We really appreciate it. I want to, the next thing is I want to talk to Gary, and because, Des told us what's happening, out there, the environment and our own genetics that are interpreting kind of what causes this damage, decreasing our skin health span. Now I want to find out from Gary what's happening inside the skin. What's it doing to us? Gary, could you quickly kind of tell us what you do at University of Michigan?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Jesse, and thank you all for attending. My name is Gary Fisher. I teach and I do research at the University of Michigan Medical School, where we've been studying the basic mechanisms and biology of skin aging for many years now.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary. So, Des talked about that, and I kind of want to know what's happening to the skin. I see that you prepared a couple slides for us to give a look inside. These are biopsies, right, Gary?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Could you tell us what we're seeing here?
Yes. These are images taken with a microscope that is very special, and we're looking at what is the structural component of the skin. If you pinch yourself, what you're feeling is what you're looking at on the screen here. And it's composed predominantly of collagen fibrils. You can see the grayish fibers provide the structural support for the skin. And buried within and attached to these fibrils are the cells of the skin, which are shown here in green. And they're large cells. They fill up the space. They touch and they communicate with each other. And this is in young skin that is healthy and active and producing the collagen that's needed to keep the skin in good shape. As we'll see in the next slide, the changes that occur with aging are obvious. So this collagen, this gray-colored space-filling extracellular matrix, you can see is fragmented. It's broken down because of the passage of time and because of exposure to sunlight and pollutants. And you can see the cells poking through because the density of the skin, it doesn't fill the space that it should be filling. And within the collagen extracellular matrix, you can see these cells, but these cells are collapsed. And so these are small cells. And so instead of producing the collagen that keeps the skin healthy, they produce enzymes that break down the collagen. And they also produce factors that cause inflammation, so that the health balance of the skin is tipped in the direction of inflammation and breakdown.
So let me get this right, Gary. So if I took a look inside of my skin, I would see this collagen. It kind of looks like the strands of spaghetti, and that gives me my firmness. And then inside of that collagen, there are a bunch of these cells, the fibroblasts that you talked about.
Yes.
And the fibroblasts, those cells, are responsible for making that healthy skin and also for breaking it back down?
Correct. They maintain the balance between breakdown and production.
Okay, so I guess it would be very important, if we're talking about keeping the skin healthy over time, that we would want to protect those fibroblasts.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that's a big part of what we should be doing to keep the skin healthy. Now, so when I think about and I see, these slides looking at the young skin, and then I look at the old skin, and you said that the cells actually change, and they start changing the way they act.
Yes.
Now, once they change the way they act, I mean, who cares? I mean, does that matter? I mean, does your skin just get less firm, or are other things happening?
Well, the skin gets less firm, and the cells in that environment where the collagen is broken down produce what we refer to as inflammatory mediators. So these are molecules that the cells release. And once they're released, they can go into the circulation. And when they go into the circulation, then they travel throughout the body, and they can affect the health of other organs. Heart, liver, lungs can all be affected by these inflammatory mediators. And this is of particular importance because we know that skin is the largest organ in the body, so that all of those cells can produce lots of inflammatory mediators. And there's a term that has been coined to refer to this process as it's called inflammaging. So that the intersection of inflammation and aging is recognized as a major molecular basis for the aging process.
Okay, so let me get this straight. For years we knew that, sunlight, can start to make the skin look older. Okay, now Des tells us that there's more things, even pollution and all of these things can affect it, even your own genetics. Now what you're saying, Gary, is that not only is it affecting the skin itself, but there's new research being conducted that tells us that since the skin is such a large organ, that damage that's occurring in the skin may be moving inside of the body too?
Yes, that's correct. This is a concept that's only recently been recognized and is still awaiting emerging data. But the concept that skin health and whole body health are directly connected is likely to be the case.
Okay, so, we really need to be concerned then both with the inside and the outside. The outside can impact the inside. Okay, that's pretty groundbreaking. I haven't heard that before. Gary, so I asked Des the same kind of thing. You're here. You have, people from your lab, and you're presenting some research here. What gets you excited? What's the thing that you think is the most breakthrough that's going to kind of help, keep healthy skin long term? What's your, one thing that you really believe in?
That's a big question.
That's a big question.
And so for people who don't know, there's an international skin research meeting here this week in Tokyo, where people from all over the world who are doing research, basic research predominantly in skin, are going to present their data and share their knowledge. And that's partly why we are here. Regarding, what was the question again?
You do a lot of research, well known, in the field, and other scientists are going to be talking to you, just like Des and like Soyun, that they talk to them and want to know what they're researching. I think our group wants to know, what are you researching? What's the next big thing?
So I think, again, there's increasing recognition of the impact of aging on health.
Okay.
And so in particular, we're investigating the intersection of skin aging with skin cancer, which is a worldwide problem.
Okay, great. So, that's fascinating to me because, we've always talked about the skin, and it just makes you look better or older or younger. Now we're finding out it's not just older or younger, but it's also the degree of health that skin has. Not just the age it is, but the degree of health that skin has. And apparently, if it's unhealthy, it may be affecting your whole body, not just the skin. That's scary to me, but I hope that out of the research that new things will come to help us with that. So thank you, Gary.
Yes,
and now, that we've heard some of these things, we talked about, skin health span, what's happening to cause it to decline, and Gary gave us a look inside the actual skin. I want to hear from Dr. Soyun Cho. And first, what do you do in your lab? But then also, you see a lot of patients, you do a lot of clinical research. What can you do for people? Is there hope? And today, what do we do to kind of help with this?
Thank you. Thank you for having me this morning. And I'm a clinical dermatologist, and I also do research. And I treat patients with inflammatory skin diseases such as acne, rosacea, and atopic dermatitis, and infectious skin diseases, and changes associated with skin aging, such as age spots, wrinkles, and skin tumors, and associated with the expertise in the clinical department. I also do research on rosacea and the effects of pollution on the skin, how pollution increases inflammation, especially in damaged skin, such as atopic dermatitis skin. And also I do research on skin aging with looking into the dermis, what's happening with aging skin. And also I teach residents, students, and the general public. And in the clinic, I treat patients with aged spots and wrinkles using lasers and filler, Botox, and chemicals that can increase skin turnover to repair the damaging effects of the aging by remodeling the dermis and increasing the skin turnover.
Okay, thank you. So some of these things that you mentioned, could you talk to us a little bit about the tips and tricks, or the professional things that you do to kind of help people understand what they should be doing, and how they can protect it, but maybe even can you repair some of the damage that's occurred?
Yeah. As Asians, we age differently from Caucasians because our skin has more melanin, so we get abnormal pigmentation in the face before we get wrinkles. So we get pigmentation about 10 years earlier than we get wrinkles. So that's our biggest problem, because we get melasma, age spots. So people are interested in removing these abnormal pigmented spots. So we do lasers, like CO2 lasers, pigment lasers for different types of pigmentation problems. For melasma, we need to approach very carefully because hard lasers can aggravate melasma. And also for wrinkles, we do like fractional lasers, radio frequency, high intensity focused ultrasound, many different procedures depending on the degree of damage that the patients have. And for preventing skin aging, I think avoiding the sunlight is the most important thing, because 80% of facial skin aging is caused by the sunlight, especially the ultraviolet light. So wearing the sunscreen every day and wearing makeup whenever possible for women, whenever they go outside, is very important to prevent skin aging, especially in Asian skin. And also keeping your barrier intact by moisturizing your skin, and also avoiding bad things like tobacco and alcohol, and getting a good night's sleep is very important.
Great, thank you, Sonia. So you mentioned a couple different things for pigmentation. You talked about, it sounds like there might be more than one type of spots or hyperpigmentation that you see. Is that true?
Yes. In the beginning of aging, we get some age spots called solar lentigine. And with time, they become more protruded and become seborrheic keratoses. But melasma is a totally different thing. It's more tough to treat. And we have to try many different things in concert to make it better.
Okay. And then you mentioned the barrier of the skin. Now I know, so last year in September, we had a large scientific advisor group meeting. All of our advisors came together, 15, with nutrition and skin and psychology and others, and we talked about a lot of these issues. And I remember at that time, you put up a slide. It was a paper just kind of starting to talk about the barrier function and what Gary talked about, maybe whole body health.
Right.
Do you remember that? What was that?
Yes. So skin is part of our whole body, skin doesn't just age alone. It affects the aging of other organ systems as well. And there was a paper done on Chinese subjects, elderly Chinese subjects. Every winter for 3 years, they applied a good barrier recovering moisturizing cream every winter to these elderly subjects, and they assessed the cognitive ability of these subjects, and they discovered that applying moisturizer to the skin prevented cognitive impairment in these elderly subjects, showing that the inflammation in the skin that can overflow into the systemic circulation can even damage the brain function by crossing the blood-brain barrier. And if you keep your skin barrier intact, you can prevent getting cognitive damage over time.
So it sounds like kind of an early paper, kind of emerging science, but I think it's telling us there may be something there that, that this research can help us with. One question I have for Des, because you mentioned pigmentation, and you said, Soyun, that here in Japan, Malaysia, other Asian countries, that pigmentation is probably one of the first things that we see with decline in skin health. That's really obvious. Des, your lab does a lot of research in pigmentation. Anything you want to mention to us about how that, science is evolving?
Thank you. Yes, skin pigmentation is one of the features or traits of humans that we can distinguish so easily across the globe. If you go from the north of the globe to the equator to the south, we can map the entire planet in a beautiful tapestry of skin color. Skin color, of course, originally derived as an evolutionary benefit to equip us to protect ourselves against the environment. Now people live in all different parts of the world, different perhaps to where their ancestors lived. So, for example, in Ireland, we had over 200 years people moving to Australia. But in Australia, this pale Irish skin, red hair, green eyes was not suited to Australia. So as a result, we have very high levels of melanoma in Irish people that moved into Australia instead of staying in Ireland, for example. So we also have some evidence that people with similar skin color, say from Malaysia or Singapore compared to Spain, even though they have similar skin color, they have different risk of melanoma, suggesting that behind the superficial skin color, there is a lot of genetics that distinguish us from each other. So we are only beginning to understand the genetics that are much more complex, that may predispose ourselves to certain conditions. And so it's not just on the level of skin color, but it's something behind that. The skin is very complex. It's not just the surface appearance of skin that's important.
Okay, thank you, Des. I have one last question for the full group. My question is this: as we move forward and we think about now, we have kind of some of these connections starting to be drawn. When you think about skin treatment, is it only the topical things that are applicable now that we're thinking about, that it may, or is the stuff that we take, supplements or food or some of these other things, do you think those may be important in the future for even skin health?
Yes, the answer is yes, of course. Our diets affect all of our functions, as Sojin mentioned, cognitive function, a joint's ability to move, ability to think, so that skin is not separated from the rest of the body. Okay. And as we are told, and as we should be cognizant of our diets, to eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, it affects not only our internal organs, but our skin as well.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. I want to, I know that we have a full afternoon, a lot of great, more discussions coming up. So I want to thank our science advisors for coming out today. This is a special treat. Trust me, we've never done this before. This is the first time, and to me, this is a big deal. I've been at Amway now for 26 years, all around the world. Again, being able to work with folks of this caliber, it's incredible for me every single day. And hopefully you heard some things that you haven't heard before, some things that are exciting. I heard some scary things, but I also heard things that lead me to believe that there's some hope. There's new research being conducted that, eventually will lead to new things to kind of help us have a better health span of our skin, as we move through time. So thank you again, Des, Gary, and Soyun. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mary.